I work with Shilo Kilber here. Here's the deal. Yeah, I'm horrible about the microphone. I'm sorry. You're not the first one. So we're going live on the show here. Tonight we drove up here to talk to you about property tax, the initiative to answer questions, stuff like that. We have Naomi Chaffee. I know. Chaffee drove up here from Bismarck. She's with Turning Point Faith USA. She's going to speak for a little bit. I'm going to do 5 minutes. Then we're going to turn over the mic to these guys, let them talk. And then I'll finish up questions at the end. So are we up and running? Perfect. Well, for those of us joining us online, we're way early tonight. My name, like I said, is Marvin. This property tax initiative. Let's get the why I'm involved in it first. I ran for Secretary of State in 2022, primary against Michael Howe. And along my campaign trail, I had, I'd say 15 to 20 different legislators promise me that they were getting rid of property taxes legislative session. With that said, I went through all the bills this year before they got passed. And I saw special interest groups getting property tax relief, or not property tax relief, but tax relief. I saw our oil industry taking major tax relief on extraction tax, which is the only way North Dakota makes money off of oil. I saw the income tax relief, which, I mean, really, that doesn't benefit any of us sitting in the room. It doesn't. Yeah, it's a flat tax, but the ones that benefit are making more than $500,000 a year. So when Rick called me after session, he asked me if I would get on with this petition. I don't normally join petitions. You can ask Tuttle that. It takes a lot to get me signed on to one. I said, send me all the information. I want to read it first. I want to see what it actually does. And if I agree with it, I'll sign to it. And it took me about a month to get back to Rick. Because I went through everything. I went through our Office of Budget and Management. I went through the fact that our Legislative Assembly spent, let's say, roughly $17 billion this session. And your legislators, you have good legislators in this room because they fought against a lot of this spending. But at the end of the day, everybody keeps coming back to the question, well, how are they going to pay for stuff? How are we going to pay for stuff? Well, the oil extraction tax, let's just start there real quick. It used to go up to 6% when the West Texas Index hit $90 a barrel. So 6% on a barrel. Now they capped it out at 5%. Where we really lose money is on the re-stimulation wells. When the bill came through committee on the re-stimulation wells, they said that there's no real way to tell how this would impact North Dakota. Well, there's a state website that's called Bakken Restarted, said that we had approximately 7,500 capped wells in Western North Dakota. All those wells qualify for this tax break now. In the original bill, when it was brought forward, put it at 0% for 5 years. 0% extraction. When it finally passed, it passed at 2% extraction. 2% on every dollar. Now, right now, we are sitting at almost the highest we've been on oil in 2 years. We're hovering right underneath that $90 a barrel. Doing that math, North Dakota is going to lose between $3 and $5 billion in extraction tax. Versus our $1 billion a year in property tax. So tonight we brought the petition with is for you to sign. It's for you to give people the opportunity to vote on something our legislative assembly wasn't able to do. And I hear everybody going, well, how are we going to pay for schools? How are we going to pay for our county taxes? How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for that? If you look at it in our Constitution, North Dakota's Constitution, the Legislative Assembly is supposed to provide funding for your schools. They're supposed to cut that check. In this last session, we spent $5.2 billion towards the schools for the next 2 years. Say they're already cutting a pretty big check. So this is going to come down to fiscal responsibility, which is what we should have as a red state. It's part of the Republican platform to be fiscally conservative. We're not doing it. Another part you can look at, Health and Human Services. Before you apply appropriations, $6.5 billion for the next 2 years. So between those two, you're at almost $11 billion out of 17. Health and Human Services is split into 6 different districts in North Dakota. Each of those regions are funded by the legislature. But each county still receives money for their health districts, even though they no longer apply. That's all money that can return back to the state. That's all money that goes back to our pockets. So I'll get to that in a little bit, but that's just something to think about while our other 2 folks talk here. I'll be wandering around. If you guys have questions, I'll gladly talk to you. If you have questions when I get back up here, please ask them. So with that, I'm going to turn over the mic to Naomi here. Chaffee.
I can't help.
It's been a long day.
I don't think it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Chaffee. I'm from Bismarck, and let me just say it's an absolute honor to be here with other people that share the same values that I do. So I work for Turning Point USA Faith, but I'm also a constitutional advocate. I plan on going to law school next year and going into constitutional law. So the mission of Turning Point USA Faith is to bring biblical values back as a standard in our community. But you don't need to be a Christian to understand that love is patient and kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. You don't need to be a Christian to understand the concept of loving your neighbor. You don't need to be a Christian to understand that you should be doing the morally right thing. If people don't have a standard in which they live by, this leads to moral relativism. And then anything can be right and wrong. And our founding of our country is based on biblical values. This wasn't to say that the founding fathers wanted the United States to be a theocracy. They didn't want to force people to pray or to go to church. But that doesn't change the fact that the values that are instilled in our Constitution are still from the Bible. And you hear a lot of people say these days that, oh, the founding fathers were just a bunch of racist deists. And I can't blame the people that believe that, because on the surface level, that's what it looks like. But once you begin to understand the history, the context in which the Constitution was created, that's simply just not true. Christianity in the colonies was in these people's lives in every single aspect. It was in their community, it was in their government, it was in their schools. So for people to say that it wasn't based on biblical principles, again, it's just false. So with the mission of Turning Point USA Faith, how do we actually do this? So we go to school board meetings, we look at policies, we look at legislation, we partner with other groups, we are in our community, we host classes and events. We're trying to get in the schools right now, the high school specifically. And this doesn't just have to be a Bismarck, North Dakota thing, because I'm from Bismarck, but I want it to be a statewide thing because it's just that important. Once we begin to forget where we come from, it turns into tyranny. I think at this point it's anarchists, the moderates, and then constitutionalists. One way that we do that too is through my church, New Song Church. We have a radio station. It's called Club Radio, 100.7 FM. It's just in Bismarck right now, but we play Turning Point USA content. So it's like Charlie Kirk, Dennis Prager, Eric Metaxas, just people that are fighting for truth because we want people to be able to tune into truth. And this comes to, we have to be bold. It's hard for people to step up and be courageous when no one else is doing it, because I'm sure, as you guys all know, it's hard to be courageous. You'll get threatened, your lives, your families, your jobs. It's not easy. If it was easy, then all of us would be doing it, right? So for me, as a constitutional advocate, it's very important to me that people understand our founding. It's important to me that people understand the Constitution, why it was created, and just how it came from the Declaration of Independence to the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, and then eventually the Bill of Rights. And a lot of people just don't understand that. What the Founding Fathers intended, like I said, was to have the country founded on biblical principles, because they knew that these values that the Bible had, even if they weren't Christian, were crucial to a successful nation. When people hear the term separation of church and state, they don't know what it means. A lot of people think that separation of church and state is in the Constitution. It's not. It was written in 1802, a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptists. Our First Amendment says that Congress cannot make a law respecting the establishment of religion. But what does establishment of a religion actually mean? So when we look at separation of church and state, what was happening in the colonies is that, again, Christianity was their religion. There wasn't Satanists. There wasn't all of these crazy religions we see now. It was Christianity. And what was happening is the Puritans had left England to escape religious persecution from the Church of England. But what ended up happening is in the colonies, they still ended up establishing Christian churches. And smaller denominations like the Danbury Baptists, who wrote to Thomas Jefferson in 1801, were scared that because they weren't the established religion in the colonies, that they were going to be facing discrimination, and that's what was happening. So then Thomas Jefferson wrote back to them, we have separation of church and state. Your denomination is protected. People don't understand that. It takes a long time to look into these primary documents and to look at the history of our nation. So I can't blame these people because they don't teach it in school. It's sad. So what I do is I look at these primary documents, I research everything, and it takes hours of research. And what I do is I take all of this dense information, make it in short little YouTube videos for people to watch to begin to understand the history behind all of this. Because again, if we forget from where we came from, it turns into tyranny, and that's what we're seeing today. So besides that, I also have a podcast with my boyfriend. His name is Wade Bromke. He is a prosecutor for the state of North Dakota. We talk about politics, government, law. One of the videos that we just did was we talked about the Second Amendment and what the New Mexico governor did when banning guns was unconstitutional, because it is. We also had Riley Gaines on our podcast, and we are starting a montage of talking about the colonies and history, because again, they don't teach this in school, and it's incredibly unfortunate that we are forgetting where we come from. So we also look at policies, we look at legislation. So I'm not sure if all of you guys know, but tomorrow at the Civic Center, there's a North Dakota LGBTQ+ summit. And part of it is being paid for by the North Dakota Health and Human Services. So our taxpayer dollars is going towards this. They're paying for, if people request, they're paying for their travel, they're paying for the hotels, they're paying for their per diems for food and the registration fee, our tax-paying dollars. So we are having a prayer walk at the same time as a registration to show that we don't agree with what's happening, but also to recognize that these people are hurt and traumatized. And as a Christian, it's our duty to be praying for them. So when we look at what we can actually do in our community, because a lot of people are like, oh, I have opinions, I want to go and do stuff, but it's hard if you don't have a plan of action, right? So I'm from Bismarck, but in Devil's Lake, go to your school board meetings, look at the policies, go to your county commission meetings. These are all things that enact change. But one of my goals is to make sure that what I'm doing and what our team is doing in Bismarck is statewide. This cannot just be a Bismarck, North Dakota thing, especially because how we see how blue Fargo and Grand Forks is becoming. It seems like these small towns in Bismarck are the only sane places left, which is incredibly unfortunate for a conservative state. So if you wanna talk to me about maybe seeing what we can do in, your city or Devil's Lake, we can exchange emails because this is incredibly important. But it's also important that we are banding with other groups. Like we're partnered with a bunch of groups around the state because strength comes in numbers. No one can do this kind of stuff alone as much as we try. If we, public comment at school board meetings or at whatever, it's not as effective as, if we do it as a group. So all of those ways are ways you can get involved. And a couple of the people that, groups that we're involved with, I do a really great job of this. Marvin is one of them. I mean, he's incredibly smart. He does public commenting and research, outstanding person. And then we have people like the North Dakota Family Alliance. Mark and Jacob are just incredible people that research this kind of stuff and go to legislation and lobby for biblical values, for family values, which is incredibly important. The National Rifle Association, incredible at lobbying. Concerned Women of America, Linda Thorson, she's my contact. Whenever there's meetings happening at the Capitol that's sketchy and they don't want people to know about it, she texts me and I make it known to my people and we go and we public comment. So a big reason why that this is happening in the United States and now North Dakota is because in the Constitution, it states that the power is within the people. And we have been for too long complacent, and we are on the defense to immorality. We are being reactionary to immorality. We're not being proactive because it's scary. And I was talking to a person in power in Bismarck that could change some of the stuff, and he, and I quote, said, "I do not want to rile up the LGBTQ plus community." Why are we being reactionary to immorality? That's not what we're called to do. Because at the end of the day, we, the people, need to be fighting for ourselves, for our family, for our community, for our state, and for our nation. No one is coming to save us. We are the solution. So let's be sure that we're not being reactionary to immorality anymore and being proactive for morality. Thank you, guys.
Good evening. My name is Shilo Kilber. I live over in Ray, which is about 40 miles out of Williston. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and we'll just kind of go from there. A few years ago, I got involved. Actually, I'm a part of the Sons of Liberty. I'm a part of the Tioga chapter, the home chapter over there in Tioga. So kind of a long story. Anyway, I got involved. I showed up to a rally in Williston where a bunch of patriots were getting together, and that's kind of where I met some of the people that started this journey for me. And it's where I met most of the people in the Sons of Liberty that started that group. And so just a little bit about them. We've expanded into 8 different chapters now throughout the state within 4 years. As you can see, what we stand for, we're not the militia that some of the media makes us out to be. We try and do a lot of educational things, such as what we're doing here. And so we've had just a few of the events that we've had rallies for the medical staff when they were pushing the vaccines on them. We've had the constitutional study, Paul Engel, out a few times. And so, yeah, it's a good group. So I'm glad to see a lot of you guys out here. With that, I guess I don't really have too much on the property tax. I'm going to let Marvin kind of handle that. He's more the numbers guy on it. I guess my main thing is it's not right, in my opinion, that if you don't pay these taxes that you lose your land. Doesn't make sense. I mean, let's put all the financial stuff aside. It's not right that they can take your land. And then people, one of the arguments is, well, what about the local control? We lose local control. But do we honestly have it anymore? We don't. I don't think we do. We're fighting state's attorneys or we're fighting county auditors. I mean, we can't even get voter rolls from our counties. So I just, I don't think there's an argument there that we have that we lose local control, because in my view, we don't have local control. So, and honestly, I think the only thing that's going to save us now is our kitchen table. And what I mean by that is we need to go back. We need to start talking about this stuff, not just with our friends, family, everybody. We need everybody's involvement to get through what we're gonna end up going through. Because I think in between now and the election, times are gonna get pretty hard. They're gonna try a lot of things. And I think there's a movement going on right now, but it's not a movement of bearing arms. It's going to be a movement of what are we not going to do? What are we not going to comply with? Have you guys thought of that? Even in my own little community of Ray, 850 people, I look around, I look at my neighbors. How many of them are going to actually stand up when stuff starts going on? Whether we're locked down, whatever you guys want. I mean, pick your battle. So I would just encourage you guys to be involved. Go to your city commission meetings. Go to your school board meetings. The school boards don't even know what they're supposed to do anymore. They think they answer to the state. When in reality, they should be working with the parents, and the parents have just as much responsibility. They should be working with the parents to come up with what their curriculum is supposed to be. We need to quit being the drop-off generation where we just drop them off, let somebody else handle it. It's time as we as Americans do what we're supposed to do and hang together. So with that, Marvin, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, for the record, before we get going, about 2 hours from now, when you see me, if you run into me in public, I'm going to be wearing a t-shirt, a pair of gym shorts, a pair of sandals. That was my life prior to COVID. Like, I've always paid attention to North Dakota politics, but I've never been involved. I always voted. I always researched who I was running or who I was voting for. I found out their platforms. I made an informed decision. But if you would have told me 5 years ago I'd run for Secretary of State, I would have told you you were out of your mind. What got me involved? September 1st of 2020, a Facebook post went up saying that they were going to start to push mask mandates in Bismarck and Mandan. In my household, we can't wear them. It's not we don't want to. It's because we can't. I myself, with a mask on, have about a minute and a half before my lungs go into all sorts of not good things. And when I saw this stuff, I'm like, they're not going to put it in place. We're in North Dakota. They're not going to put this in place. And my wife was sitting and watching the Bismarck City Commission meeting. And one of the commissioners, who I know on a very personal level, goes, well, I told my own kids if they want to go to school, they need to zip their lip and wear their mask. No parent should ever have to tell their child that. So fast forward now, 3 years. one run for statewide office with no budget, no name, and running my butt off because I started late. I took 33% of the primary. But it goes back to, we can complain to each other all the time. We can complain about the weather, we can complain about our politicians, we can complain about our school systems, but if we're not showing up and making our voices heard, we can't fix anything. If we're not involved, we can't fix it. So I took my own bit of humble pie and I did something. And it's been an amazing journey because I'm standing here tonight because I believe that we as a state can turn our entire outlook on things around. And it goes back to, like Shilo said, the kitchen table. Politics at Thanksgiving should be discussed. Religion with your children should be discussed. Some of my best conversations, because I love playing the devil's advocate, have been with people where I will deliberately argue the opposite side of what you're talking about, because I want to see how you really feel about it. I want to know why you think the way you do. And I hate labels. You can ask Shilo. I've worked very hard to avoid being labeled as anything. And it's because when you put a label on someone, when you hang a label on someone as ultra-right or ultra-left or whatever, you immediately lump them into a group without getting to know them. You immediately stop wanting to understand what they have to say. So that's, in a nutshell, why I'm here. Because this petition, this ballot petition for property tax relief, what you're signing to isn't saying that you're voting for it. You're giving the people of North Dakota the chance to vote for it. Because we already saw what they did with term limits. This thing passes on statewide race, on the statewide ballot, it's going to be a fight at the Capitol next session. It is going to be a fight like no other, because this is a constitutional change. So normally I know what I'm going to speak about when I do these events. And they gave me a great list of topics. They did. Speaking as to why your county sheriff should be a constitutional sheriff, why they should uphold their duty, the vows of oath of office. I mean, your elected officials, folks, better have a vow, better have a current oath of office, because everything they do makes them accountable for your community. And without that oath, without them saying that they've taken that oath, you end up with things like mayors selling their own family's land for $1. You end up with these shady, backdoor, underhanded deals that happen, and they do happen. So they gave me these great ideas to talk about. And the only thing that kept coming up for me was, it's for the kids. And sitting here listening to Shilo and listening to Naomi, let's look at property tax one more time. It's for the kids. How are they going to pay for schools? How are they going to pay for teachers? How are they going to pay for new schools in your area? We didn't eliminate the special assessment. So if your community has a legitimate need for a new school, it goes on a ballot, y'all get to vote for it. So if you think Devil's Lake needs a new high school, you think they need a new grade school, you, the people, will have the opportunity to vote for it. But before you vote for any of that, you better make very, very sure that your school board's being transparent with you. Because I don't want to hear the stories that I do where teachers are literally paying for the supplies in their classes. They're paying for stuff out of their pocket. I shouldn't hear about teachers that are fighting for a $300 a year raise, while administrators are putting modest six figures into their pocket. Your teachers are struggling. And after 2020, our grades are struggling because, let's face it, this whole distance learning didn't work. It was a joke. It was because of what they've done with the schools that I'm homeschooling my youngest daughter. I will not put her through North Dakota public schools until we see change. And that includes getting rid of Common Core.
Yes.
Because guess what? Our North Dakota standard, if you stack it next to Common Core, is the exact same thing with a different label on it. That's what they like to do. So Bismarck tried to pass a unbiased crime, or they called it a hate crime bill on June 14th of 2022. That bill added 2 non-federally recognized protected classes to it. It also decreased the fine of the penalties that they were trying to attach to it. So where it could be 5 years in prison, the crime was reduced to 30 days and a $1,500 fine. They already passed it in Fargo. They passed it in Grand Forks. They needed Bismarck to pass it too. We got it killed because we showed up at the meeting. But you can't go to these meetings running just based on feelings. When you go to them, you got to come with facts. And that's what I did in Bismarck. I came with the facts. I took their entire hate crime ordinance. I broke it down against the Century Code and showed them every line that they had on there was decreasing the penalty. Who does that protect? What they really didn't like is when I showed them their own pamphlet that they had in the back of all the seats, saying that they were, what's the word? Non-discriminate. And I pointed out the fact that there was 2 protected classes that wasn't even on their own stuff. And that they would have to fix every chapter of their title in order not to be in violation of the law that they were trying to pass. Now, why this is important is because they tried bringing it through the Legislative Assembly this last session as well. They just changed the name of it to unbiased crime instead of hate crime. That's why you need to pay attention. So yeah, it's for the kids. You know, all this money that we're spending is for the kids. How about we ask our elected representatives to be actually transparent, to show how much of the CARES funds that they got, to provide receipts as to what they wasted the money on. Because they did. And they really fight you in order to prove those receipts. So it's for the kids, Health and Human Services. You guys have the School for the Blind right here in Devil's Lake. Deb. I believe there's also a school here for kids with autism too. There's one close. When I was campaigning last year, I heard a story from a family out in Dickinson that this school that was supposed to help autistic children was having trouble finding funding. Yet Health and Human Services had a $5.5 billion budget. We shouldn't hear stories like that, but we do. So let's look at the property tax this way. We're in a conservative state. We're at the top of the Bible Belt. We're supposed to be ultra-right Republicans, and we're supposed to be fiscally responsible. So how about asking, instead of how are we gonna pay for things, we make the legislators actually be transparent, and these departments actually be transparent about how they're spending money and saying, hey, we've spent the last 4 years having you ask us to tighten up our belts and we'll make it through. Now it's time we tell the same thing to them. $2 billion over 2 years. Well, we already found half of it with oil extraction tax. You know that money's not getting spent here. But yet, here we are. And your elected officials, a lot of them are going to be screaming at you that this shouldn't pass because we won't be able to pay for anything. If you look at the bill, if it passes, there's a timestamp for the end of 2024. Your counties, your townships, your cities will still get the money from their budget, but it will be provided by the Legislative Assembly, not from property tax. If you were born and raised here, there's a good chance that there's a family farm somewhere along the way that probably got scooped up for pennies on the dollar because somebody couldn't pay or didn't know they even had their property taxes. So how can you say you own your land when you're renting it from the state? Our house, my rent on my house is about $5,000 a month, or $5,000 a year. That's $5,000 that I can put towards educating my daughter. Just think about it. They don't provide assistance to homeschool families. They don't provide assistance to parochial schools. Yet, these parents are pulling their kids out in flocks. So is it really for the kids? Or is it really so unelected bureaucrats can continue to get rich off of your pocket? So, now that I'm done with my rant, does anybody have any questions?
Aye.
Perfect, let's hear it.
All right. From what I see in North Dakota, about 70% of the people vote are over 50. They don't live on credit cards. So they're wondering how that's gonna be paid for. It isn't, they don't care if you had a zillion budget money in your big budget up in Bismarck. They don't care. They're worried about themselves. So how would you get them to vote? How would you get them to vote for this without telling them where the money's gonna come from, except it's not gonna come from God anymore?
I mean, the easiest way to have that conversation is ask them how much they're already paying to keep their house every year if everything's paid for.
They don't care. They're already doing it. They already know that their roads are paved, their roads are being done, everything's being done, and they don't want to upset, so.
Okay, but are they living off Social Security? Are they living off Social Security? Are they living off retirement? Are they living off of, because what happens when a market crash happens?
Yeah, I think who cares?
And I mean, like-
Where it's coming from.
like the last market
You're
crash?
not getting any answers of where the money's gonna come from, except you're gonna try to stop the river from flowing a certain direction, and it's, you can't do that. You know, once the money's already leaving the state, it's gone. You're not gonna change it through your legislature.
Yeah, but
You
we're,
guys sit and fight, bicker about it all, and nothing will happen. So,
well,
I'm all for owning my property forever. I like that idea.
I know, I like it too, but you look at, okay, you look at my folks, they're on a fixed income. They're retired.
Yep.
Their house is paid for. But the last time the market dropped, I know on my personal retirement, it cost me 60 grand. If I was retired to lose that much monthly income, where that property tax comes due, I'm gonna be facing losing my house. So that's more of where I come from. This is a way for you to keep your property instead of renting it from the government.
I understand, but when people vote, they have to know how they're gonna pay for that, not just make it out of a budget that's wherever.
Well, I mean, if you really wanna look, the last state budget was 95 pages of BS.
Understand.
I got it printed off, it's on the table over here. And that's the questions that they need to ask. I mean, you need to talk to your legislators. You need to pull the bills. You need to ask them why we had 3 identical bills that would have paid $750 million to a retirement fund that's $1.5 billion of debt. That's the questions we need to ask. I understand being paid for. I understand where you're coming from. But how much of our wealth, how much of our personal wealth is wrapped up in a stock market that could fail tomorrow?
None. Well, it's gonna fail.
See?
There.
But how many folks are living off Social Security that the US Congress could just say, nope, we're done with this program?
It's gonna happen.
Yep.
Not happen. It's not gonna happen this country, they know it.
So this is our kind of way of saying, we're gonna take care of our own. So,
But you gotta get the votes, and you're not gonna get the votes this way. It's not gonna happen. I hope it does, but it's not gonna happen.
well, I already know we're a large way through it. The thing that's helping us most with the votes is the increase in property taxes all across the state. Hillsborough 79%, Portland 49%, Bismarck 7 to 20%. So, I mean, they're really making the case for us because they spend. Now they want more. The biggest problem that we see, the biggest problem that I see is these boards, these school boards, these city commissions. There's a little century code for putting out bids. The second part of that century code means if they declare it as an emergency, they only have to post the bid for 10 days. And they choose where that bid goes. These boards are subcontracting back to their buddies for whatever price they want to do. It's happened in Bismarck, it happens in Williston, it probably happens here. So again, back to billions of dollars, or where it should come from, or where it should matter. It's a very good question. But the question I ask back is, where is your money at right now? And can you afford it if everything goes sideways tomorrow? Can you afford it if these overseas banks that finance things decide that they're going to come calling on your loan? Because, well, North Dakota is the only state in the union with our own bank, our own resources, a positive budget every year, and they have to leave session with a balanced budget. This just adds an extra page to that budget. So really, if everything went sideways tomorrow, we, if it wasn't our clause anymore, could separate, become our own self-funded nation, because the way that our previous generations positioned us. And I'm tired of seeing the current generation squander the wealth of the future generation. Next question.
Yeah, my name is Rich Flanders, and I'm all for property tax reform. The thing about it is I'm kind of a doubting Thomas, and if we lose our property tax, unless we've got a good, clear plan for where the revenue is going to come from, everybody's afraid to get rid of it, because some of us don't trust politicians.
I agree. I'm glad I'm not a politician. I just play one on TV. No, you're right. Like, where is the money going to come from? Dr. Becker's put out a great list. We have an informational sheet. You can go to the property tax reform. Like, that aspect, after 8 years in legislature, he's got some pretty good ideas.
See, Marvin?
Yeah.
So I have the list that was presented, things that can be cut or removed. And there's $81 million property tax credits, $115 million from Operation Prairie Dog, $200 million legacy fund earnings, $750 million pork and corporate welfare, $165 million non-federal budget, $540 million limit one-time spending projects, and $55 million limit for paying for out-of-state college students' tuition. So these are things that have been already kind of presented on where they could pull that money from.
Don't forget the legislature quit paying themselves. $2 million in contracts to the Roars family this last session between rental properties and construction. So there's that. There's ways to find this money. I bet you we could take your guys' local auditor, send her to the Capitol, and she could find you some extra missing money. Unless you got a bad auditor, then I'm sorry, you need to elect a new one. But really, I mean, you take anybody in the financial industry, you set them into this. Like I've talked to Josh about this, Josh Gallion, and I go, what do you think about a bill that would take all the accounts in the state, our townships, our school boards, our city commissions, our county commissions, and run them through the Bank of North Dakota? You would still use your local bank. The money would get pulled to your commission, your township, your whatever, but all deposits would go there. All receipts would be posted there. So you, as a normal citizen, could go, hey, how much did Ramsey County spend this month on what? And have those receipts right there for you to look at. Because I kind of want to know how they're spending it. Bismarck's big debate right now is Bismarck-Burley Public Health built a $10 million building. Now they're expecting the city and county to pay for it. They also got $5 million in CARES funds that nobody's really sure how those got spent. That's the kind of stuff we need to look at. Your township isn't going to crumble. Your township's actually the strongest form of government in the state. You should fight for your townships. You should show up at your township meeting boards. Your township can hire a sheriff. You can have your own law enforcement. So you look at, everybody looks to the capital, but it comes back to your township. How's that money getting spent? Your city, how's that money getting spent? Your county, how's that money getting spent? So at the end of 24, the snapshot, as I understand it, your township will still receive that amount of money from the legislature. Your city will still receive that amount of budget from your legislature. It's just now, instead of your city wondering what they're gonna do when they lose a property tax or they lose sales tax because another business closed. In 2020, like 73 small businesses in rural communities shut down because they couldn't get funding to stay open. This last session, the Department of Commerce brought forward two different bills. One was to eliminate support in small communities for IT upgrades. And the other one was to support elimination of small business loans in rural communities. They don't want you out here. They want you rammed into the rat race that's Bismarck. They want you rammed into Fargo or Grand Forks. I'm just here to make sure that you can stay where you're supposed to be. My hometown is maybe 90 people. Small towns are my passion. So when they called and asked me to come up here, I'm like, heck yeah, let's go, Devil's Lake. And I called Shilo, I'm gonna be in Devil's Lake on the 20th. He's like, sweet, I'm coming too. And Naomi was excited. She's like, I wanna go. It's because the rural communities get ignored the most. Yes.
I got a couple of things.
Sure.
One is, a couple of things. One is, I thought that you said earlier, talk about where the money's gonna come from, that basically just a percent or so on the oil extraction would pay for everything. I don't know the numbers at all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm just asking.
I broke down the numbers based on the Bakken Restored website. It was 7,500 capped wells that would count as restimulated wells. Interestingly enough, they didn't apply that extraction tax to the reservations. They can opt out of it, so they keep the 6% and the 5%. But on the average daily basis, it worked out to 3 different options depending on how the bill passed over the next 5 years. They capped it out at 18 months. With the revenue, it's between $3 and $5 billion worth of lost tax revenue.
Right, would that take care of a lot of what everybody's concerned about?
Yep.
Have the person just get them numbers down pat and say, hey, this is it, this will take care of this, make it simple for people
Yeah,
to understand.
I mean, that's the easiest one to say is like, why do we keep giving businesses tax breaks?
Yeah, but then I got an example, I'm in construction, but, so I like to see building, but take UND, for instance, in Grand Forks.
Yep.
They have destroyed more good buildings. It's unreal. Buildings that are just solid concrete brick.
Yep.
Bulldoze them down to build new stuff. And you're talking many, many, many millions of dollars. It's insane.
Yep.
I mean, they could use that money to help the kids, even with their tuition, of course.
Bismarck has 2 new schools that they spent, I believe, $12 million on each of those schools. When there's perfectly good schools that they shuttered the doors. Department of Public Instruction just bought a building over on Sioux Line Avenue. I don't know if it's for Burleigh County or what, but they had Hughes Middle School that they've been using for years. So instead of staying in the building that they were on, they went and bought something new. I don't understand, because you look at these new schools, they look like prisons. They do. There's no windows, there's no sunlight, there's no joy. They're sucking the life out of your kids. Sorry.
I'm not, they are.
I have a quick question for
Yeah.
you. I'm over here.
Okay,
I'm
hi.
little, look down.
Don't mind me.
You talk about, across the kitchen table and small communities like ours and going to the commission meetings and speaking up. I think it's imperative, if we're gonna win this battle, that we have a very clear vision of what we're all saying the same way in a simplified manner to get people's attention, but to also not have to ramble on forever and ever. This is the story. This is how we're going to get there.
Yep.
And if we do that, we can be successful. If we don't do that, we may be dead in the water. Who knows?
I'm a firm believer in the KISS rule. Are you familiar with that?
Yep.
Keep it simple, stupid. If you go to school for advertising, that's the first rule they teach you. And I agree. The biggest thing, and Shilo and I have talked about it, and it's been one of my biggest grievances for a long time, is we have so many grassroots groups trying to get things done. We do. They're all across the state, every corner. All across the country. And the big thing that I've talked to Shilo about is you really need to pull the groups into one. But you need 3 things in order to do that. You need a lightning rod. You need a leader, somebody that people gravitate to. You need a whip. And that whip is somebody that's going to keep everybody on task so that we're delivering the same message, that we're having the same conversations. And finally, you need your librarian, your researcher, the person that is verifying that everything that is being brought forward has legal standing and is not hearsay. And to get North Dakota pulled under one umbrella, I would love to see that. Because I've said forever, if we can fix it here, we can set an example to the rest of the country. If you can fix it in North Dakota, you can fix it in the rest of the country. This election initiative that's coming out. I'll be honest, I didn't like one of the first drafts of it. I like the new version of it. Shilo and I talked about it on all the way out here. And the question that I asked when I was campaigning, because I didn't run on elections, but everybody asked about them, is can you tell me without a shadow of a doubt that our election was perfect. And I would always ask, if you don't believe it, raise your hand. Every time I asked that question, hands would go up, including sheriffs who would wave their finger at me because they didn't want to raise their hand because they had questions about their county elections. So removing the machines, signing that petition gives this a chance. Because when I testified on these bills this last session, I had a senator, as I was presenting actual factual documentation as to what was happening, going, they were breaking the law. They were breaking the law. And admitting that what was happening was illegal. Yet they killed every election bill that came through. That says it all right there.
Every one of them, there's like.
Every one of them.
79 Right there.
So yes, to keep it simple, stupid, absolutely. Like, if you want me to sit down and shut up, I'll do that now. If you have more questions, I'll keep going. It's just, I'm very passionate about this because I shouldn't have to be here. I shouldn't be having these conversations. I should be 4 years ago when I could sit on the floor and play with my little girl and ignore politics because we lived in North Dakota and our elected officials were supposed to be doing the right thing in the first place. Y'all shouldn't be sitting here. It's Friday night. You know? Grandkids, family, friends, but we're here because we care.
I just had one question. One of my concerns with the property tax one was that if we remove all the property tax in North Dakota, are we the only state that will have done that?
We'll be the first state.
First state. So
Texas is.
Texas is trying, nobody else has passed it. They pay it, but they also get the kickback from the
they
oil.
get money back from oil. But so how do we, my concern is that will we have people wanting to invest in land, possibly farmland, and that would make the farmers that we have currently have to fight against these higher income people trying to buy the farmland?
I'll say the name you don't want to.
Pardon me?
I'll say the name you don't want to, Bill Gates.
Yeah, okay. So, and I'm not even, that would be out of state. And so I'm even thinking about in-state. If we have people in-state that want to buy land just as an investment, how do our small farmers compete against that? And if that's the case, do you foresee that there would be a need for any further legislation to protect that?
Okay, counter question. How many pieces of these lands are being purchased at the cost of property taxes that are owed?
Oh, I don't know that. Sorry.
What was it, 63 pieces of property out in Grand Forks County are up right now for the cost of their property tax? Pennies on the dollar.
They're doing it anyway, whether there's property tax or not. That's
So
basically saying.
our North Dakota legislature should have corporate farming laws in place that protect against the family farm being snapped up. But these generational farmers, these kids that are just starting out, these kids that want to be getting into farming, this is a huge relief. It's one thing that they don't have to worry about at the end of each season. My folks, when I was little, had their own farm. They went through bankruptcy and lost everything. I was 5 and I remember how hard that was on them. I grew up ranching, but I grew up ranching where my dad ran other people's ranches. So really, we should be happy that our property is going up, especially if we don't have to pay for the tax on it. So you look at Williston, how much is a house in Williston when the oil boom was happening?
You can't bet for under.
Bismarck, they were going for double their price. So really, is it going to be any different? Yeah, well, it's Devil's Lake. I love Devil's Lake, but I'm very superstitious about Devil's Lake. Because I remember driving across the bridge out here towards Minnewacan and watching the waves coming over the top. So, like, I get it. Sketchy things happen up here. But really, that's what it comes back to. I mean, if the property isn't taxed, I'd say there's more incentive for small farmers than there is currently.
I would agree with that. I think the farmers themselves would like the property tax reduction. I just worry that they wouldn't be able to compete against people who had more money. But I was just wondering if there was more legislation that would be needed to protect that.
We can have lots of conversations about that, Kathy. So, and that's the thing is like, I work with legislature. I work with certain legislators to try and get bills through that protect us. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not ashamed to talk about it. I let them take the credit, but there's a lot of times I'll get phone calls, hey, take a look at this. What needs to be fixed here? Senator Heitkamp, whether you love him or hate him, 3 years ago called me during the 2020 session. He goes, Marvin, I want to do an abortion bill. Because we all remember how controversial Representative Hoverson's bill was. He goes, I want to do an abortion bill to make it illegal to have abortion in North Dakota. I go, okay, well, let me think on it. And I call him back the next day and I go, Jason, this is what you do. Treat it like the dispensaries for pot. You can't have them within so many feet of a school. You can't have an abortion clinic within so many feet of a school. And he goes, okay, I'll bite. How far are you thinking? I'm like, 75 miles of school land. And if you think about it, if you look at the map, there's like one spot in the entire state that doesn't affect. But it's one of those things where you got to think outside the box too, because again, rural communities are my passion. Our kids are my passion. I don't want my daughters to ever have to do what I'm doing now. So if we fix it right the first time, instead of just shotgunning bills through, because let's face it, this last session was death by 1,000 cuts. It was death by 1,000 bills. And you can't tell me you guys had time to read the 93-page Health and Human Service Bill, which completely changed the definition of what the Department of Health can do.
I was going to make one more statement, and I'm not sure if everybody here is aware of it, but we did have a bill that was related to the 1 mil that the state does provide for property tax across the state that goes to the University of North Dakota School of Medicine.
Yep.
And it wasn't to get rid of it, but it was to put it on the ballot so that the people could decide if we should be still spending or still be levying 1 mil for the University School of Medicine. And I believe it gains 11 million, is it a biennium, I believe? And that got voted, it originally got voted for, that we could put it on the ballot and let the people decide. And then it came back, I believe, the next day and was voted down. And they would not allow the people to decide if they still wanted to spend their property or put money into their property tax to let that money go to the University of North Dakota School of Medicine, which was a bill that was originated in, what was it, 1948 to encourage healthcare providers. And I think it was from Senator, I can't even say his name right, from Stanley, Kenyanen. He originated that one.
Yeah, it's been a while. The University of North Dakota Medical School.
And I don't think that's on here, is it?
No, but expenditures for the school were $227,832,254 for the 21 to 23 biennium. Yeah, we talked about that. And I agree with you, but we need to fix a lot of things. Personally, I'm down for rewriting the Century Code and just, putting it in DCC 01 and don't be an a-hole. But that's me. Because really, we've spent so much time and gotten so far away from the Constitution that we're supposed to be protecting that we're almost at a point where we got to start over. Property taxes is a way for us to take back a little bit of our control, keep our land, keep our houses, and make sure that our children have houses when they're older. It's a small step, but it's a huge step for us. Other questions?
I got one more.
Sure, let's hear it.
Why does the state keep telling our auditor or guy up in the, or lady up in the courthouse telling us that we gotta keep raising taxes on property tax? Why does the state keep telling us to do that? Isn't that our problem?
And so they can spend more money.
So what gives them the authority to do that?
That's a good question. Because power goes from the bottom up, not from the top down.
I've had that for a while.
Yeah, well, again, taking back your townships, taking back your school boards.
Gas on the mortgage not doing anything for us. No shit.
Wow, I saw that bus. I saw that bus that was wearing a khaki jacket that was over there. Just ran you over. No, it's a solid question. But you look at the same time, we keep telling the state auditor to keep his nose out of local business too. It's kind of counterproductive.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
You go up there and you ask, and they say, well, that was a mandate from the state. The state is mandating the taxes go up.
Then I would like to see the actual copy of where that mandate comes from. Yes, sir.
I think the state mandates that we raise our ag land values by a certain amount, but I don't think they mandate that we raise the property.
But you look at some of these counties, it's been a decade since they've even looked at your property. Our friend Kit, who we've done a show with, said pretty much she had like a crayon scratch note for the appraisal on her house. That was stuck to the door. She thought some random person was doing it, and all of a sudden she got her letter in the mail saying she was looking at a 79% increase. So that again goes back to your county auditor, making sure that things are done annually, not once every 10 years.
Which really goes back to the initiative because all the auditors should be elected, not appointed.
Exactly, elected auditors with oaths of office. Okay. I don't know if I answered your question or not there.
Well, yeah, you did, but, the state mandates that you have certain ag land values, and county commissioners have to be within a certain percentage. But they could lower their mill levies if they wanted to, and not raise taxes.
Exactly.
They have complete control over mill levies. So, I mean, I blame the state for a lot of things, but I don't blame them for making us raise our taxes.
Can you tell me what a mill is?
Mill is it's a factor, it's a multiplier, like you levy 10 mills on your property and that generates so much income. Follow me?
Oh, no, I get it, but can most people tell you what a mill actually is other than your house is at 13 to 15 mil?
They get confused over it, but all it is a multiplier, it's 0.04, 0.01.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like most people opening up their envelopes and looking at it are just going to see an increase. They're not going to understand what a mill is. They're not going to understand what that is.
Most people look at the number.
Yeah, they just see the number at the bottom that says, oh my God, I owe $5,000 to property tax. 6,800 I heard over here earlier tonight. Yes, sir.
So you're talking about the mill of people, the average person, I was talking to someone earlier. The majority of the population has a house loan with escrow. All they know is their payment goes up. They don't really care. I'm not saying they don't care, but they don't understand what taxes and all. But but that's why I think a lot of them don't even really understand that.
So that's a great point. I had an interesting conversation the other day with our lender for our home. Because if you don't put down 20%, you have your mortgage insurance that you have to carry, right? Because we bought during COVID when the market was low. Now I get back my tax estimate saying that my house is actually valued for this much more, which puts me over what my mortgage insurance would be by about 20%. So I called my lender and asked about getting rid of that. And they go, no, you signed the loan. So you get that for the entire 30 years. We don't take that away. Even though that's the stipulation for having to have it is 80%. And the funny thing is that's through North Dakota Housing and Finance, which is a state agency. And it's saltily funny. All right, any other questions for me?
Hey, Marvin, I have one.
Okay,
I
let's
have
have it.
one. So, okay, I actually am just gonna share something. So, in the news, we see all the time about the counties across the state that are sending out letters on foreclosures and the notice to evict. And I have been very passionate about people that live on a fixed income because we have a lot in our community, low income, elderly, whatever. You work your whole life to have a home that you can call your own, but really it's not your own. I've experienced this just recently. I lost my dad a few weeks ago. And as we have gone through paperwork and discovered some things, my dad was being foreclosed on. All of his property, he's a small business owner, was being foreclosed on. He needed to be out by October 1st. And my dad died a week before that deadline. Can I prove that it was just due to the stress of not knowing where he's gonna go? I don't know. I don't know. He had a massive heart attack is what they claim he had. What caused it? I don't know, but it's not fair. You work your whole life and you look over the course of however many years you paid property tax, and it should be yours at some point. And I know that there's incentives for veterans and there's for farmers and all of these tax incentives that help, and that's great. But what about the people that fall in between, that don't qualify, and that live on a fixed income? And it really sucks, to be quite honest with you. And I hope that other people don't have to experience it, because I still wonder every day that, could I have saved my dad's life in the stress because he didn't have the money to pay it? And I chose not to help. And it sucks. So I am going to give it everything I've got. We need to get rid of property tax at some point. There's ways that we spend money in this state and across the country that is absolutely insane. Paying for all these illegal immigrants to come over here, and we fund them and we house them downtown. And it's like, my dad can't even live in his home that he's lived in all of his life. So that's my rant. But I'm gonna go strong on this. I'm gonna try to get the signatures. Liz, one thing is, you know what? We all have to be in unity on this. The thing is, we have to have an education. We have to, people need to be educated. So many people I talk to, it's like, where's money gonna come from? Where's money gonna come from? You know what? The first thing is we have to get it on the ballot. If we don't get it on the ballot, we know what the answer is, nothing. So the first thing is we have to get enough signatures by March to get it on the ballot at the primary. Otherwise, if we miss that, then we have to try to get it on the ballot for the general election. Personally, I would like to see it at the general. I think there's more people that would participate in that election. But either here nor there, I think it's worth a shot. I think we need education. And really, we have to take it one step at a time. We have to be able to get it on the ballot. After we get it approved to be on the ballot, then we have to go have an education campaign again about what it's going to mean, going after our legislators to educate them on how we want them, where we want them to take the money from. There's a lot to it, but I think it needs to be done in segments, because we can't just sit here and go, well, I'm not going to vote for it because I don't know where the money's going to come from. What happens if my program that I support loses its funding and now I'm out of a job? We can't look at it like that. We have to just take it one step at a time. So, that's all I have. Thank you.
I think we end with you there, Amy. That was amazing. No, you're right, though. It's a matter of just getting it on the ballot. My personal experience was when we were gathering signatures at the state convention, the higher ups of our GOP, many of them would refuse to sign my petition. And it's because they said that they were pledged to Michael Howe. And my comeback was, I'm not asking for you to vote for me. I'm asking you to give me a chance. And they said, well, that's what happens when you're late to the game. It's a game that needs to end. You guys are amazing. Thank you for listening to me. Yeah, Charles.
One thing everybody's missing, okay, is the economic impact that will be given to us by abolishing property tax. We did Beacon Hill study, and we did the first measure too. And it showed that we would actually eliminate 10,000 government jobs. We would create 10,000 private sector jobs in the first year. You guys need to think what government said when they say, oh, we need to give this business a tax break. Wow, the economic development that it'll create. Wait a minute, if we give everybody a tax break, what about the economic development that it will create? We, for some reason, in North Dakota, do not understand that we are the wealthiest state per capita in the country. But we have 1 in 15 people working for the government. We have grown government so substantially that we can't afford to figure out where the money's going to come from. The money's already there. Just think about we're in Dubai or we're Saudi Arabia. We're burning $970 million a year in natural gas out in the Bakken. I get sick when I hear Bergam say we need to bring carbon from all these ethanol plants in the area. We need to be carbon neutral. The number one carbon emission in North Dakota is flaring. He's not talking about that. It's a hoax. We gotta stop believing what these politicians are telling us. There's this Christmas tree bill. Everybody should realize what this Christmas tree bill that our Supreme Court found unconstitutional was. There's $1 billion in that bill that would pay for property tax. We have so much money, yet we always think we're poor. We are the second leading producer of oil in the country. We're probably in the top 10 of the world. And it's only going up. We're not losing oil. Everybody's like, well, how long will it last? They're giving the money to the oil companies. These oil companies are coming here and stealing it from us. That's what he's talking about here, giving the tax break to the oil companies. $4 billion in tax breaks this last session, and we're still going to ask, where's the money going to come from? That's our money. That's our resource. We need to start standing up for our state. We should have under $1 gallon gas. Every oil-producing country in the world has under $1 gallon gas. Bergam just sent out an email because he's running for president, and he's trying to act like Donald Trump. We need to lower the gas prices. Well, how about your own state? So that's my concerns.
We could put in a state-funded refinery.
I've been saying it. Take that money out of Wall Street that we're losing money in. We lost $600 million last year in the school land trust. Okay, $600 million we lost. I'm sorry?
PERS was different, but PERS is 1.5 billion negative.
No, that's down from the
Yeah.
pension liability. No, and that's not a true number either. Okay, but no, we lost $600 million of our investment in Wall Street from the school land trust. The only reason the school land trust keeps going up is because we still have royalties coming in from the oil. They aren't telling you how much you lose. If you go to these meetings, you'll realize we're losing 25% of our value. We should have all that money back here in North Dakota. We should be investing in the refinery, 3 refineries, one for natural gas, another for gas, and we should have our own gas reserves. Read our Constitution. Our Constitution only funds 3 things: the School of Medicine, the state hospital, and guys, it is unconstitutional to use property tax to fund schools. The Legislative Assembly shall provide for a uniform system of free public schools throughout the state. That's number one, Constitution. Public finance and debt, Article 10, the legislative assembly shall be prohibited from defraying the expenses of the state to the levy of assessed value of real personal property. What does that say? We can't use property tax to fund schools. You know, every time I quote that to the legislature, oh, that's your interpretation, Charles. Really?
Sounds pretty black and white.
No, that's my rant.
They say that about everything.
Yeah, they say that about everything. But, before I go, you guys do have two fighters that are sitting in this room. You do. Donna and Kathy, you guys were awesome this last session. Sorry to call you out, but. Thank you. And thank you for answering my phone calls when I'm like, hey, we should probably look at this. This isn't right. So with that, Shilo, you gonna come say goodnight to everybody? Because we've been going for like 2 hours. Come on. Since we've been live streaming to our show, you can find us. Oh boy.
My opinion, I think we need to eliminate political parties and lobbyists. What's your thoughts? Go back to the.
You still need the two parties. I think there's certain positions that need to be nonpartisan. Like, we shouldn't be supporting DPI. The Secretary of State should be a nonpartisan position. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't get to pick your pony at convention, because really the Secretary of State is enforcing the law. It should be nonpartisan. Your Attorney General should be nonpartisan, but they're not. Judges too, impartial.
But I guess my point is that if there wasn't parties, you would vote for the person that is bringing the most to the table overall, right?
In that case, it may be voting for the person that spends the most. Because think about it, how else are people going to be informed about who they're voting for other than mailers, Facebook, and the news?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a fan of the party system, but I think that any politician should be for the people and not the party first. So,
I suppose a limit then on spending or something.
yeah, you would have to cap campaign finances, you'd have to cap donations, you would have to cap everything that we've been trying to fix, so that we don't have a governor dumping money into legislative races.
Well, in that case, would we be able to eliminate the parties then? If there's a cap on?
I don't know.
I don't know.
There's too many what ifs to that.
Just a thought.
Too many what ifs. I think that we need to have a party chair that's more willing to kick people out for not supporting the platform.
There you go.
Yeah,
Right there.
I think we need to have our districts run by people that want to be involved, that want to hold their legislators accountable. And again, we saw it 2 years ago, there's an awful lot of legislators that got censored.
nothing happened.
It could have gotten worse. And I'm glad term limits passed for a reason, even though I don't agree with the verbiage on it. I wish it was said 16 years and done instead of the 8 May. Because if you get 3 good legislators in one district, in your district, what are you gonna do in 8 years when they wanna switch? You lose a legislator and then God only knows what you're gonna get. But, at this point, we need change. And Shilo and I have been talking about it. If you're gonna run for office, we wanna know about it. We wanna have you on the show. Because we want you to find support in your local community. We wanna give you a voice. And we've also, and we've said blatantly many times that we're not always gonna agree. I don't expect anybody in this room to agree with me. I'm just here to present information. And that's what it needs to be.
I know we've talked, did you turn it
Huh?
on?
Yeah, I turned it on.
There we go. Yeah, there it is. I know we've talked a lot about the property tax initiative, but I do believe the Election Integrity Act is just as important. I was able to go down a couple months ago and I was able to speak at the Mike Lindell Election Summit. And the stuff that we're dealing with up here, it's all over the country. And so it's very important that we fix our elections. And this is a very good step in that direction. It gets the ball rolling because right now, February it was, we had Dr. Frank up here and I was able to drive him around for 4 days. We did 4 different seminars around the state and we talked about the anomalies in our election here in North Dakota. And what we learned is that North Dakota has the worst election in the whole state. We don't even have thank you, Charles. The whole country, country. Anyway, we don't even have voter registration. So we have a lot of work to do here in North Dakota, and this Election Integrity Act would be a very good start to that. So with that, I will say goodnight to everybody, and thank you for coming. Go ahead, sir. Oh, all right. Thank you.
That's a good idea, but I'll second your fire on that.
Yeah. Maybe scrap I would say. Oh, I don't because I'm not. Yeah. I'm gonna just prize
All right, thanks, guys.
Check. Okay, before everybody leaves, just so you know, there's silent auction. Just gonna give away some more door prizes here in a minute. There's silent auction items over here. I don't know if everyone's aware of that. There's some pretty cool stuff that Basket